Welcome to the Healers Café, conversations on health and healing with Dr. Manon.
So welcome to the Healers Café. And today I have with me Candace Plattor, and she is an addiction specialist. She's the developer of the Plattor method of family addiction therapy. And she works with her team of top associates helping families and addicts break the cycle of addiction for good. So I'll give you a little bit more on her background. Therapist in private practice, where she specializes in working with the families of people who are struggling with addiction in her unique and signature family addiction therapy program. As a former addict with over 30 years clean and sober record, Candace learned that overcoming addiction is a family condition. Everyone in the family is affected by addiction, and everyone needs to heal. For 3 decades, she has been helping both addicts and their loved ones understand their dysfunctional behaviors and make healthier life choices. So I really want to welcome you.
Thank you.
And and so I think, well, I'll ask you the same question. So what started you on this journey, and how did you find yourself in this field of work?
Yeah, it's quite a story. It started in the early 70s. I was in my early 20s at that point, and I was on a cross-country trip with a friend in the car in an old beat-up VW van. And we were going from Calgary to the east coast of the US, where that person's family was from. And we stopped for lunch, and I got very sick right after that. And we thought it must be food poisoning, but it never got better. It never got better. So by the time our destination ended, I was very, very sick. And at that point, well, it took a little while for the doctors to finally diagnose me with Crohn's disease. And it was the new disease on the block. I mean, the doctors didn't know anything about Crohn's. They didn't know what to do for me. I was in pain all the time. So what they did was they gave me a lot of addictive medication. I didn't know at that time that that's what it was, because addiction was not on the radar then.
Right.
It's certainly not the way it is now. And, they were giving me things like codeine and Demerol and oxys, different kinds of oxys, and Valium, different kinds of benzos. And that I've only recently learned that is like a killer combination of prescription medication for a lot of people. And so I feel very grateful to be here, first of all, because it takes a lot of people out. So, it helped me feel better. And I started smoking more pot. I had smoked pot socially in university, like a lot of people did back then. All of these things helped me to feel better, so I just kept doing them. And that was the beginning of my addiction to opioids. So it got to a place of my being very depressed over the years, because those are all depressants in the system. And I had no idea what was going on for me. All I knew was that I was thinking about suicide. And I knew I had enough pills. I knew I could do this. So I got scared. I reached out for help. This was after 15 years of being an opioid addict, basically. Wow. And I received some really amazing help, but it was quite a scary journey. And it was the beginning. Reaching out for help was the beginning of my recovery. And in about 2 weeks, on July 18th, I will be celebrating 33 years clean and sober.
Wow.
I know, it's a wonderful, much better life.
It is. And did you end up finding a real solution for your Crohn's?
Well, I think I did over the years. I'm not on any medication anymore, and I'm a lot better. I mean, I used to be in the hospital every time I turned around because I was so sick, so sick. I've had surgeries from it, and you
Yeah.
know, but I learned over the years how to take care of myself and what to eat and what not to eat, and how to manage stress and to do all the things that you need to do with chronic illness, and especially something like Crohn's that's so affected by stress. And, I mean, it depends on the day, but I'm so much healthier than I was before.
Mhm.
I,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Well, that
I
was,
have a life today.
yeah, that was definitely times where the unknowns were
Yeah,
still the number one way of dealing with pain. It's like
yeah,
deal with inflammation, but you basically deal with pain that's why it's such a huge crisis,
yeah, yeah,
today. So
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Anyway.
So as I had been a teacher and I'd been a counselor in a different kind of way, and when I realized that I was an addict, and it was helpful for me to know that, I didn't mind the label because it showed me what I had to do.
Mhm.
Um, as I was given the help, I made a decision that I wanted to work in the addiction field and give back what I'd been given. So I got a job in the downtown east side at this wonderful outpatient clinic called Watari. And I was there for 16 years working with the addicts and the alcoholics down there, and just loved it. But what happened was that the families of my clients started to call me. I don't really know why they started to call me, but they did. They started to call me, and they would say things like, we're at the end of our rope. We don't know what to do anymore. We're just trying to help. We love them so much and we don't know what to do. And so I started seeing the family members, and I kept hearing their stories, and I could see the patterns emerging.
Mhm.
And the basic pattern that I saw was that they didn't mean to be doing this, but they were basically enabling the addict that they loved so much. And they were giving them money, they were letting them live at home, they were letting them behave abusively, they were doing things like that. And I knew that if they kept doing that, that nothing would change. Because if nothing changes, nothing changes. So I started working with them. I didn't know what I was doing either, but I started working with them, and I began to love working with them. And as they made their changes, the addicted clients that I was working with started to change too. And that's when I knew I was kind of onto something. So I decided to write a book because it was only me at that time. It was just me kind of working with the addicts. I went into private practice, and I wanted to reach as many people as I could because I knew I was, like I say, I was onto something. I knew that I was doing something that was successful with these families. And so I wrote a book that won some awards, and I started, getting known for this. And if anybody had ever told me when I was in my addiction or even in my early recovery that I could do something to help the world, I would have thought they were nuts. But here it is. So people can change, addicts can recover. Yes, we can.
Yeah, I love that message, because that's the
Yeah,
thing. Sometimes, being identifying with a condition, like a diagnosis, so to speak,
yeah,
can be a starting point. And
yeah,
for others, it can be an ending point. It's like, well, then there's no change. It's like there's nothing to be done. And it's really, the possibility is there. It's not the diagnosis per se. It's our what we bring to it and what we
yeah,
make it mean,
yeah.
but clearly in your case, it was the beginning of.
It was the beginning of quite a journey. And I went to 12-step programs for about 10 years of my recovery and really enjoyed them. And there are some really wonderful things about 12-step programs, like you know, the sponsorship and the fellowship and all of that. But I found that it was hard for me to be in alignment with that philosophy after a while, because they see addiction as a disease.
Right.
I have a disease. I can't just say I'm not going to have Crohn's anymore, but I can do that with addiction.
Yes.
And they tell us that we're powerless over this disease. And I was already seeing that I was not powerless over this disease, you know. So it was a difficult juxtaposition for me, and I decided to not continue to go. I don't see addiction as a disease. What I know to be true for myself and for all the other people that I know who have some time in recovery is that it's a choice about whether we stay in active addiction or go into recovery. It's not something we're powerless over. We have a choice. We don't necessarily choose to become addicted. I don't think anybody does that, you know. But once we realize, and we do as addicts realize, that our lives are going nowhere, that we're miserable, that we're lonely and depressed, and, you know, nothing's working for us. When we get to that place, that's when it's the choice point. We have a choice about whether we're going to stay in that life or whether we're going to go into active recovery of some sort. And when families enable an addict, generally what happens is that the addict stays stuck in active addiction. So sometimes they don't even feel like they have the opportunity to make that choice, because an enabled addict, why should they recover? Why should they do anything different?
Can you go into a little bit more detail what you mean by enabling? Because it's a term used generally, you know, and I feel like really, what have you seen specifically as enabling behaviors? That would be really great.
Okay, so the difference between helping and enabling. When we're doing something for somebody who can and should be doing that for themselves, when our whole lives revolve around somebody else, when we say yes when we don't really mean yes, but we're just trying to avoid conflict, all of that stuff is enabling behavior. When you pay the rent for an addict because they're out of money because they're buying drugs or whatever it is they're doing. When you let somebody live at home, maybe an adult child who's addicted and living at home because they can't pay their own rent, and they're obnoxious and abusive in the home, and they're not contributing at all financially, behaviorally. You know, they're punching holes in the walls when they're angry. They're pushing people, you know, physically. When they're doing that kind of stuff and that's allowed, that's enabling.
Yeah.
And I've had some clients who actually have, when there used to be dealers, when you didn't have to just, you know, call somebody to bring it over, you know, they would drive their addicted loved one to the dealer or the liquor store, because at least they knew where that person was.
Right. Yeah.
And they'd pay for the substance. They'd pay for the addiction. Those are enabling behaviors. And often people do that. It's like people would think, well, why would anyone do that? I mean, obviously it's not a good thing to do, but it's because a lot of loved ones of addicts of any kind are what I like to call people pleasers. And I am a recovering people pleaser, so I really know how that feels. And it's really an icky feeling when you start, when you say, yeah. So the reason that they enable is that they're trying to avoid the addict getting mad at them or frustrated with them or that kind of thing. So that it's just easier to give in.
So you feel that it's the path of least resistance in that sense. It's
the path of least resistance for many people, but it doesn't fare well.
No, that's interesting. Yeah, it's like enabling. Yeah, it's the confusion we have sometimes about really caring for somebody and daring to to let go so that they can actually grow and do what they need to do to get out of
Yes.
it, right? And I think
Yes. It's exactly right. So the loved ones, the parents, the spouses, the siblings, whoever, need to do their own work to be able to strengthen and empower themselves and be able to say no when they mean no. And for an addict, to me, being able to set those kinds of healthy, self-respecting boundaries is the most loving thing you can do for the addict, because it helps get them out of the addiction. Otherwise, they stay in there. So it's like a loved one needs to be able to say, I love you so much that I'm willing to not do this anymore. That's how much I love you. I'm willing to not enable you anymore because it breaks my heart to see what you're doing to yourself. I don't want to contribute to that because I love you.
And what are the, like, as far as what's available to people who need to make that difficult decision? Because, you know, they've been enabling, or they recognize that maybe they've been enabling, and whether it's a parent or a child or whatever the situation is, or a husband or a wife, whatever, you know, and it's impacting, obviously it could be impacting their kids, whatever the situation is.
Yep.
And they've been trying to keep it calm and quiet because it's easier.
Yeah.
What is the next step to do that is loving? Like, you know, I know you talk about boundaries, but what's the next step?
I believe that the next step is to reach out for help, because most people don't know how to do this on their own. And that's understandable. It's not something we're taught in our culture. You know, we're not taught to set healthy boundaries. We're not taught to do that. Being able to reach out for help to somebody like myself who has a program for this, there are so many options for the addicts, especially if it's a substance addict, like alcohol or drugs. So many choices. There are recovery houses, there are detoxes, there's treatment centers, there's all kinds of things for them, but there's so little out there for the loved ones, and they suffer right along with the addict. If the addict is doing well, they're doing well. If the addict isn't doing well, they're not doing so good, you know? And so it's this roller coaster that they're on with their addicted loved one. So they need to reach out and learn how to get off the roller coaster. Them being on the roller coaster with the addict is not helping. It's not helping.
Yeah, no, clearly. I mean, in that though, there's the need to know that the addict can, or the one with addictive behaviors, let's say, is actually able to change that. And I think there is a belief, even in the 12-step program, as you said, which, you know, basically it tells you to keep repeating, I'm an addict. And, you know, and it's like, well, if it becomes your label, then you really can't, you don't believe that there's even a chance to get out of this, right?
That's true for some people. For me, I knew that I could get out of it. I just knew I could, and I was doing that. And a lot of people do that. But for some people, it keeps them very stuck. You're right. You know?
And for the enablers as well, because they actually have that program too, that, you know, that there's nothing.
And so what I like to teach people is to stop arguing for their addict's limitations. Because the addict is not limited. The addict has choice. The addict is making a choice. And the loved one is not responsible for that choice. And the loved one didn't create that choice. Because no matter what happens in a person's life, it doesn't mean that anybody else makes you an addict. There are so many different ways to respond to life. But if you're doing it with addictive behaviors, you can come out of that as well. You can choose something different. So the loved ones need to understand that and this is something that they say in Al-Anon, which is a 12-step program for loved ones, is that you didn't cause it. You didn't create it. You can't cure it because you can't make somebody else's decisions for them. We are powerless over other people. but not over ourselves.
Hi, this is a small commercial break, and for you to let me know that you're enjoying these conversations, please go 1, to subscribe to my podcast, number 2, write a review, because if you write a review on iTunes, more people know about this and I can help spread the work, my work, but the work of everyone else I'm interviewing. And number 3, please sign up to my tips for your healing journey. And you can do that under www.drmanonbolliger.com/tips. Thank you.
Reach out to somebody who can actually help you see that, can help you see what the addict in your life really can achieve. And I'm living proof of that, as are many other people, to learn how to set the healthy boundaries that they need to set, because boundary setting isn't that easy. I mean, there's kind of a skill to it. There's kind of an art to it, you know, and learning those phases of boundary setting, being able to really do that, maintain the boundary, not to cave when you get poked a little bit.
Exactly. Yeah. So one thing too that I'm curious. For me and my experience, and I think also having that quite closely, the work of Dr. Gabor Mate, it would appear that at the base of addiction, there's often trauma, if not almost.
Yeah.
I don't like saying always, but almost,
Pretty much always. There's some kind of trauma that's happened, and when we've been through traumatic experiences, whatever they are, we can create a whole story around that, about how we see ourselves. And if we don't see ourselves very well, in a very favorable light, if we feel like we deserved abuse that we got, if we, can't seem to heal from a broken relationship, that kind of thing, it can really trigger addiction, because it's an interesting thing. Addiction is, as I see it, kind of a twisted form of self-care. Like, self-care is really important, and I love self-care, and I've become a self-care queen, and I teach it because it's so important. But addiction, it's like we're trying to feel better. We're trying to feel better. So that's good that you want to feel better. I'm glad you want to feel better. Now let's find some healthy ways for you to feel better. But with trauma, it's a bit of a scary thing for me sometimes, because a lot of trauma specialists seem to want to go back into the trauma and stay there for a while, kind of dig around in that. And I don't see the value in doing that, personally. I need to know what's happened for somebody. I need to be able to connect the dots and put the pieces together so I know what I'm working with. But, if I knew how to build a time machine, to go back in time, if I knew how to do that, to go back in time and change the trauma so that it didn't happen, well, I'd be the richest person in the whole world. People would be lining up around the planet to come see me, but that's just not possible that I know of. So it's okay, we go back into the trauma, you tell me about that, we do the work that we need to do a little bit about that, and then we come into present time and we deal with now. And how would you like to deal with that trauma now, going forward, so that you can have a good life now and create something better for your future.
I must say I agree with that attitude, because if you keep repeating the past, it's almost like you ingrain yourself with the stories that become the justification for the behavior.
Yes, that's right.
Which is then complicated because behaviors, like you say, I think it's very interesting that you say that you could say it's self-soothing, but it is also general, it is a form of first self-care. It is. I do agree with that, because it's like you want to feel better, and this does it, at least short term. It does. It does. It doesn't work long term. So yeah, no, that's interesting. So what happens then with people who, or I'm sure you've seen that, where a memory comes up, like incest, for example.
Yep.
And I've seen it in the work I do, because I do a body therapy called bone therapy.
Okay.
And because it puts you in parasympathetic mode, where all healing takes place, whatever the body needs to express as you're starting to be in a more relaxed state, it will often allow memories to surface. And it's gentle. It's not like you're not pushed into this. And I do believe that you don't find things out that you can't handle. You find out when you're able to handle it. So like an adult who recognizes this, a trauma, incest, or something that happened so long ago that they don't remember the details sometimes, because the memory can be completely fragmented, because that's just the nature of implicit memory. But what I have seen, then people go to drinking or to behaviors like that. Have you seen that in any, where they may not have been aware of their trauma, lived completely normal lives, and then it hits? Have you got experience with that? Or
yes, I have seen people relapse when that kind of thing has happened. I've worked with people who have relapsed when that kind of thing has happened. And what I try to do is help people see that what happened to them in the past, somebody who was incested, something like that, that was not about them. That was about the person that was creating that trauma and putting that trauma on them. That isn't about them. I grew up in a fairly dysfunctional home. I had a very narcissistic mother, successful narcissistic mother, and I really thought it was about me. I grew up thinking it was about me. Nobody told me it wasn't about me. So feeling neglected, feeling abused, being verbally abused, nothing I said mattered, that kind of stuff. I grew up believing that about myself. And that, I think that's part of why I developed Crohn's. I feel like my body just, with all that stress, finally just kind of imploded upon itself, and the addiction that followed. So I understand the trauma. I understand all of that. It took me a while to really know, to really understand, not just up here, but trickling it down, that what she did was not about me. What she did to me was not about me. Once I knew that, I could pivot, I could shift into a totally different direction. And I could start to like myself, respect myself, and not have to wear that anymore. Sometimes it comes up. Sometimes I get triggered. Sometimes I get flooded, but not very often anymore. So that kind of healing really is possible, because it isn't about us.
Right. Yeah, I think that's such a big message, actually, because especially when you're young, when, before the age of 7, when you really count on the safety and the trust of the relationship, and you don't have the capacity to analyze at that age, right?
That's
so
right.
It impacts you, and and it's with you.
Yeah. I mean, we're given the message all the time that we're supposed to honor our mother and father. Well, sometimes they haven't earned that, but nobody tells us that as children.
Right.
So as a child, a child isn't going to be able to say to themselves, well, this isn't about me. This is about their dysfunction. A child doesn't do that. A child says, it must be me. There must be, if I was just prettier or smarter or this or that, or then they love me. It must be me. I'm not lovable the way I am. And that story just builds and builds and builds until somebody says to them, this was never about you.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
You've always been just fine.
Yeah. And I think that that realization is pivotal to, if it isn't about me, then whatever happened to me may have happened, if you want to go that far, for me. Like in your case.
Oh, yes.
You know,
That's a hard one, but yes.
it's a hard one.
It's and you know, when we can see it from that perspective, it's kind of a spiritual perspective. I'm not talking religious, but you know, just kind of spiritual. When we can see that what's happened to us can be seen as a gift, as a means to grow, as a choice. Again, it's a choice of how we're going to perceive something. But most of us need a little help to get there. Because for most people, trauma is very, very painful and leaves a lot of scars that last a long time until they get some help for it. So we have loved ones of people with addiction who have their own scars. Why else would they hate conflict? Exactly. Conflict is so scary, you know. And then we have the people who are addicted who have their own trauma, and sometimes they're living in the same house. And what do? So you reach out, you get some help, you figure it out, you have somebody who knows how to help you.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Well, I find it very empowering to to make that separation. When you get that at the beginning, that it really wasn't about you, then it gives you a moment to reflect on, if this life is actually now about me, what are the actual choices I want to make? So
this is my very favorite mug that I drink out of. And it says, live a life you love. Live a life you love.
Yes.
Yeah. Because today that's what I choose. I've certainly had a life I didn't love for a very long time. And it's not negotiable for me anymore.
Interesting. Now, so another question I have for you. Some people say that that it's really important to forgive your, might be your parents, it might be, your extended family, let's say in incest particularly. I think that's what I've attracted into my practice more than any other type of abuse. So what do you believe or think about this, the idea that they must forgive?
Well, first of all, I don't believe that anybody must do anything. We'll say that. But because I really do think, I mean, we live in a planet of free will, so we have a choice with everything. There's a saying, I want to try to get this right, that when you don't forgive somebody, you're drinking poison hoping they'll die from it.
Right.
Because not forgiving somebody, and I guess it depends on how you define the word forgive as well, but not forgiving somebody can be very painful to you, to oneself, to not forgive. I think, it took me a while to kind of forgive my mother, I guess, if you want to use that word. I understand now a lot more of why she did what she did and what that was about for her. I understand narcissism a lot better, so it helps me to understand that. The entitlement, I don't know where that came from for her, but I know that that was there, and I think that people who abuse, people who offend, abusers have been abused. Offenders have been offended. This is what we know now. I mean, I don't have a statistic for that, but I'd say probably 99.999% of the time. Right? So if we can understand it from that perspective, it doesn't mean, and this is important, it doesn't mean that everybody who's been abused is going to abuse. Doesn't mean that everybody who's been offended is going to offend anyone else, because that's a choice. But most people who have gone through that in their lives, or most people who offend in later life have been offended in
Yeah.
some way.
Mm.
And so if we can understand that, if we can understand and have compassion for somebody, if we can have empathy for what their lives might have been like, to me, that's a form of forgiveness. And
Yeah.
and it forgives ourselves too. So it's not like I have to forgive my mother, because first of all, I don't have to. And what does forgiveness mean to you?
Mhm.
What does it mean to me? You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah,
but
no, I mean, for me, it's compassion. It's
compassion.
about
Yeah.
having compassion
Yes.
and understanding. It's like contextual understanding, you know, what it must have been like.
Yeah.
And I don't know, like, I'm not a big one for forgiveness. To me, it's like, it's not even my place to, you know,
Yeah.
and like, in that sense, it's like, who am I to forgive in that sense? It's like, that's going to be their work, you know, to
forgive
forgive
themselves.
themselves, you know.
That's, I agree.
Yeah. And so for me, you know, and to forgive yourself seems like a strange kind of thing. It's more like, be compassionate with yourself if you went through it, you know. And so to me, forgiveness, I don't know, it's not my thing.
Yeah.
So,
It
yeah.
depends on how you define it and how you look at it. And the most important thing is for us, any of us who have been offended in any kind of way, struggling with any kind of trauma, is to be more gentle with ourselves. And if that means having compassion for somebody else, I say go for it. But it's about being gentler with us, because we've already been through enough.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even, you know, the biochemistry of compassion changes everything, right?
It changes.
Just, you
And
know.
the Dalai Lama says so, and I really like him, so I'll go with that.
I agree with that, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. So, we're close to, but okay, we have a couple more minutes. Is there anything that you would like to share, you know, from your experience, that we haven't covered, or
We've covered a lot. We've covered a lot.
we have, or maybe a case, or I don't know, like, without names, obviously, but, you know, just to show what is possible.
Yeah. Well, you know, like I say, one of my favorite sayings is, if nothing changes, nothing changes. Or to say that differently, when you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always gotten. So, you know, Dr. Phil on TV, he has this question that he asks his guests when they come on. He'll invariably say, in his Western twang, he'll say, "So how's that been working for you?" And they mostly say, "Not very well."
Yeah.
So to me, if I ask somebody, "How's that been working for you?" and they say, "Not very well," I ask them if they're willing to do something different. Are you willing to do something different? If it's not working, how about we try something else? So when people are ready to try something else, there's no shame in reaching out for help. It's so important. I mean, I think everybody needs a therapist, including therapists, especially therapists. You know, we all need somebody that we can talk to have that hour for ourselves, kind of thing. And if we're not sure what to do to make things different, we need to get some help to do that. So that's always my hope for people, is that if you need help, reach out for it. It's here.
Absolutely. Yeah. One thing that we didn't really talk about, but it's, you know, what's happening now with COVID. So how is that affecting, you know, addiction?
Yeah, it's affecting addiction big time, because, you know, the opioid addiction is just skyrocketing. People are dying even more from addiction, and people are so scared. They're so worried. They're so anxious. And again, addiction makes you want to feel better. You do it so you can feel better, so you don't have to think about stuff like that. You don't have to think about the fact that you could catch this thing so easily and die. And the other thing about COVID and addiction is, if you have a family that has an addict still struggling in active addiction, and maybe they're living with the family now, and it's a 24/7 kind of thing where the addict is behaving badly, and the family does not know how to stop this, And they think to themselves, well, we can't send them out, or her can't send them out because they'll die out there. And so they're together 24/7 on top of each other. Horrible situations are happening because of that.
Yeah, definitely.
And then there are some families who aren't seeing, they don't know where their addict is. They don't know whether they're alive or dead or what's happening for them. They haven't been in touch with the family for years, maybe. Right? So there's all kinds of scenarios that happen with addiction and families right now in this time of sheltering in place.
And too, you know, with that level of fear, whether you're actually afraid of the virus or afraid of whatever it might be that's related to this, because there's so many levels to this thing.
Such trickle down, isn't there?
Yeah, but it trickles, exactly. It trickles down to really activating many of the stressors that activates the behavior in the first place, you know. So
that's right.
Yeah, it's
It really requires quite a choice to deal with one's feelings about COVID, rather than stuffing them down with addiction. It's hard. It's hard for a lot of people.
So, and you have a way of well, first of all, you have a book that people can read.
Yes.
And is that in the link that, because after we do our podcast, I will be putting
yes, I sent the book cover. I don't know if I sent the link. I wish I had one sitting right here, but the book is called Loving an Addict, Loving Yourself, the top 10 survival tips for loving someone with an addiction. And it's been out for about 10 years and it's very well received. People really get a lot from it. So if you don't have the link, if I didn't send it to you, I will. I can send it to you right away. And, you know, if anybody wants to be in touch with me to see how we work and see whether it's a fit for them, I've got a team of counselors. We've got a few different things that we offer. We offer one-to-one, we offer a family program, we offer groups. So if you would like to find out more, all you have to do is fill in a questionnaire. I can send you that link, and it's also on my website. And we give a free 30-minute telephone consultation to talk with you about what's going on for you and see how we might best help. So we're here.
Okay, well that's wonderful. I'll definitely put the links.
And we are international. It's not just Vancouver or BC. Right. It doesn't, because we're on Zoom, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it doesn't matter exactly
where you are. Yeah.
Okay, well, Candace, thank you so much. That's really great information to share, and very important information. All right, well, our time is up, and I think we've covered tons, and it's been really good to have you.
Yep, so, lots of stuff.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us at the Healers Café with Dr. Manon. For more information, go to drmanonbolliger.com.